A group of young friends met up at a cave in Guiyang to explore, but as soon as they crawled inside, a tragic cry echoed from within the cavern. The whole group suddenly felt a chill down their spines and hurriedly crawled back out. Yet after they were outside, the more they thought about it, the stranger it seemed, as that sound appeared to be someone calling for help. And this discovery opened up a mysterious case that had been buried for a long time. The incident of treasure hunters who met with misfortune in Whitehorse Cave, Guiyang in Wudong District. On the northeastern outskirts of Guiyang, there is a small village. To the east of the village, there is an ancient well called Whitehorse Well, and on top of the hill behind the village. In the distance, opposite this well, there is a cave called Whitehorse Cave. Locals also call it White Tiger Cave. This village was once the residence of the Tusi of the Song family in the Shudong region. Therefore, folk legends say that Whitehorse Cave is the place where the treasure of the former great Tusi was hidden, and is a fairly typical cave. Long ago explored, the space inside Whitehorse Cave is quite narrow with many branches. The connecting points between the chambers are only enough for one person to crawl through, and the height difference between the rock walls is also quite large, with places where one must climb up. There are places where one must carefully descend. On May 2nd, 1998, Guiyang had just passed the holiday break. The weather was neither hot nor cold. Tran Nguyet had just finished university and returned home for the holiday, saying a quick goodbye to his mother. Saying that he had to return to school, he left the house, but he did not take the bus back to school, but instead met 3 high school girls, Lu Puong, Vuong Ting, and Li Kongju, planned with each other to go to the nearby Whitehorse Cave to carry out an exciting expedition. But all 4 people had only heard of that cave. No one was clear on the specific location. Walking for nearly a whole day, they finally discovered the discreet cave on a hillside, said to be the entrance. It actually looked more like a wet crevice. It is no larger than a hole, only enough for one person to try to crawl and slither through. The 4 adventurous young people, without informing their families or friends, only brought a box of matches and a few candles. One by one, they crawled into the cave. Before entering the cave, the outside was still sunny and beautiful with flowers fragrant. But once they crawled through the entrance, it was as if they had stepped into another world. The inside of the cave being both damp and dark, with stalactites overhead constantly dripping water. The ground was slippery, causing every step to require holding onto the rock walls and probing slowly. Yet the group's curiosity quickly overwhelmed their fear. Their candles flickered, and the stalactites with strange shapes made the whole group immensely admire them. But as they went deeper, problems began to appear. The temperature not only became lower and lower, but the complex and narrow cave structure with countless branches was like a labyrinth, forcing them to constantly climb up and slide down to try to move forward, and walking on and on. The 4 people gradually could no longer find the way back. Right at that moment, an unexpected accident occurred, though it was unclear whether it was because the humidity in the cave was too high or the candle accidentally fell into the water. The only certainty was that their candles suddenly blew out. Theoretically, they only needed to strike a match to light it again, but unfortunately, when they fumbled in the dark to take out the matchbox, the matches inside had become damp due to the environment in the cave. In an instant, the 4 people fell into absolute darkness, unable to see anything at all. All around was only the sound of water dripping continuously, the sound of breathing, and the sound of their own heartbeats, as they were essentially lost. This meant everything was ruined. The group's excitement vanished immediately, giving way to boundless panic. At this point, they could only call each other's names, relying on touch and memory to try to find the way back, and no matter which direction they went, it seemed they only saw the same darkness and dampness. Disaster piled upon disaster as the female friend walking in front, because the ground was slippery, slipped and fell into a deep pit. This deep pit was about 5 meters deep. Below were stalactites and jagged rocks. She was injured, truly stuck in there and unable to move. Chen Yue took off his belt, Lying prone at the mouth of the pit, he tried to pull her up. However, in the slippery and dark conditions, all efforts were in vain. There was no light and no food, only the method of using water dripping from the stalactites as the only water source. Initially, they could still try to endure, but as time passed, hope became increasingly fragile. Their bodies grew weaker, and their will was worn away little by little. Finally, there was no longer any motivation to find an exit, only helpless, huddling on the ground, leaning against each other to keep warm. At some unknown moment, the injured friend who had fallen into the pit no longer showed any movement. Next, Chen Yue also stopped breathing in the darkness. Finally, only Li Kongju and another female friend were left still trying to endure. They could no longer remember how long they had been trapped. Actually, during this time, their families had also discovered unusual things. 1 week after Chen Yue left home, the school teacher asked Chen Yue's parents why their son had not come to school. Realizing the situation was not right, Chen Yue's father and his aunt began searching everywhere in the outskirts of Guiyang. The family spent more than a month searching all the neighboring villages, but they never found anything, because who would have thought they would crawl into such a secluded cave? The turning point appeared on June 13th, which was the 42nd day after the 4 people were trapped, when Whitehorse Cave welcomed a few other young people who also intended to go exploring. Holding flashlights, they crawled to a place not far from the cave entrance when they suddenly heard a faint and mournful call. The whole group suddenly went cold down their spines and hurriedly crawled out of the cave. But after being outside, they felt something was wrong, as that sound seemed to be the sound of someone calling for help. So 2 of them summoned the courage to crawl into the cave and discovered a thin, yellow-skinned young girl in critical condition. The girl introduced herself as Li Kongju, living nearby, and realizing the urgent situation, everyone went to the nearest village to report to the police and then went to inform the girl's family, and after that, the rescue team arrived. They discovered that hidden where Li Kongju was, there was another girl still alive. Going a few more meters further, they found the body of a young man with no signs of life, and deeper in was the body of the girl who had fallen into the pit earlier. Although the bodies had begun to decompose at that time, based on the victim's wristwatch, Chen Yue's mother confirmed that her son, while the 2 girls at that time still showing signs of life, their bodies were severely dehydrated. All muscles were atrophied, and they could not move on their own. Rescue workers carefully picked up the girl, gently carried her out of the cave, and immediately transferred her to an ambulance. Although the local authorities tried their best to provide emergency care, it was all too late. Prolonged dehydration had led to multi-organ failure. 1 girl died on the same day she was brought to the hospital. Li Kongju also passed away at the hospital the next day. An expedition that seemed simple and easy ultimately led to an irredeemable tragedy. And according to what a relevant blogger discovered after an actual exploration, the total length of Whitehorse Cave is actually only over 100 meters. Walking slowly, visiting the entire cave, and then coming out, at most it only takes half an hour. Yet these 4 people actually did not go far, and from the location where the bodies were found, that they were only about 20 to 30 meters from the cave entrance. But after losing their only light source, those few dozen meters became a labyrinth, never finding the exit. No light, no direction, only going in circles in the same place. In a place just inches from the escape, they crawled back and forth in the darkness time and time again, but never found the correct path. They were trapped in the darkness like that for 42 days, a total of 1,800 hours. No one can clearly tell how they got through those days, but it is not difficult to imagine the kind of pain and despair that slowly spread.